Part 1. Life as Preparation. Carl Jung, one of the most profound psychologists of the 20th century, proposed an audacious idea. The first decades of life are not the main story, they are preparation. He believed that life truly begins at 40, and until then, we are engaged in a vast, intricate research project on ourselves and the world around us. The experiences, mistakes, relationships, and ambitions of youth are all forming the foundation for the profound individuation process that awaits. From childhood through young adulthood, we navigate a world rich with complexity and challenge. Each experience, whether joyful or painful, contributes to the architecture of the self. Childhood is a period of rapid learning, where basic emotional, social, and cognitive skills are formed. Early successes and failures, friendships and conflicts, the first encounters with love and disappointment, all become part of the subconscious matrix that shapes personality. Even the seemingly mundane events of school life, interactions with teachers, competitions, early social hierarchies, teach lessons that will later resonate during introspective self-reflection. Cinematic imagery. Imagine a young explorer walking through a vast, ever-changing landscape. Mountains of expectation rise in the distance, rivers of emotion flow unpredictably, and forests of social interaction conceal both danger and opportunity. Each step requires observation, adaptation, and courage. Sometimes the explorer stumbles, falls, or takes a wrong path, but every misstep is a lesson, every obstacle a formative moment. By the time the first 40 years conclude, this explorer has traversed valleys of confusion, climbed peaks of achievement, and crossed bridges of intimate relationships, all part of a vast personal cartography. Adolescence and early adulthood are particularly formative. During these years, we wrestle with fundamental questions. Who am I? What do I want? What matters most? We experiment with identities, roles, and social masks, testing limits, exploring passions, and negotiating our place in the world. Careers, hobbies, romantic relationships, and friendships become laboratories for understanding human behavior and ourselves. Mistakes are abundant, failed relationships, misjudged ambitions, and social missteps, but each failure provides crucial data for the evolving self. Jung emphasized the importance of the persona during these early decades. The persona is the social mask we wear to navigate the expectations of family, society, and culture. It is necessary. Without it, we could not survive the complexities of social life. Yet, it is incomplete. While it allows us to interact, achieve, and be recognized, it only represents a portion of who we are. Over-identification with the persona creates limitations, as individuals confuse social performance with authentic identity. Cinematic metaphor. Imagine constructing a grand theater. The stage is elaborate, actors perform flawlessly, and the audience applauds. The theater represents early life, the persona built for external validation. Behind the curtains, however, the true self quietly observes, waiting for its turn to be acknowledged. The applause of the crowd cannot nourish the soul. It is a temporary validation. The deeper self remains hidden, shaping the inner narrative and awaiting its moment of emergence. These decades are also a time of accumulation. Skills, knowledge, emotional intelligence, and resilience. Career ambitions take shape, relationships form and dissolve, personal values are tested. Life's unpredictability teaches flexibility and perseverance. Successes provide confidence, failures teach humility, and both contribute to a growing sense of self-awareness. Jung saw this phase as preparatory research. It is a time to gather experiences, to test hypotheses about life and the self, and to develop the foundation for profound transformation. Decisions made in early life, educational paths, career choices, relationship commitments, are not just practical steps. They are experiments that illuminate preferences, strengths, and weaknesses. Reflection upon these experiences later fuels conscious integration and self-realization. Cinematic imagery intensifies. Picture a library containing every book ever read, every conversation ever had, every choice ever made. Each book is a moment of learning, each page a fragment of the self, and every sentence a lesson encoded in the unconscious. Over decades, the library expands, filling with both triumphs and regrets, hopes and disappointments, dreams fulfilled and dreams deferred. By the end of this preparatory period, the library has become a repository of wisdom, ready to guide the next stage, a deliberate, conscious engagement with life. Psychologically, these years are also about emotional calibration. Young adulthood teaches how to regulate impulses, navigate conflicts, and form attachments. We experience love, loss, betrayal, and joy, each shaping emotional intelligence and resilience. The nervous system, brain structures, and cognitive patterns are being wired to respond to stress, ambiguity, and novelty. By the 40s, these systems are prepared for deeper reflection, integration, and individuation. Yet preparation is not only external, it is profoundly internal. Jung emphasized that the unconscious is constantly active during these decades, assimilating lessons, storing memories, and forming archetypal patterns that will later guide insight. Dreams, intuition, and spontaneous inspiration are signals from the unconscious, hinting at paths and potentials yet to be realized. By 40, these unconscious currents converge with conscious awareness, providing a rich substrate for self-inquiry and authentic living. In essence, the first 40 years are a training ground for consciousness. We are researchers, explorers, and apprentices, collecting data, making mistakes, and slowly discovering the landscape of the soul. The experiences of youth, though often chaotic or confusing, are invaluable. They are the groundwork for individuation, the process by which the self becomes whole. Without this preparatory phase, there can be no deep integration, no conscious life guided by authenticity rather than external scripts. Cinematic closure. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon, looking back over a landscape of rivers, mountains, forests, and cities. Each scene represents a decade of learning, growth, and experimentation. The path has been winding, challenging, and unpredictable. Yet, every step has contributed to the formation of the self. The first 40 years are complete, and now the individual stands ready to step into conscious life, guided by insight, courage, and authenticity. Reflect. What lessons, experiences, and insights have your first 40 years provided? Which moments have shaped the foundation of your authentic self? Share your reflections below and honor your journey of preparation. Part 2. Awakening at 40. At 40, something begins to shift. Quietly, subtly, yet profoundly. It is not a storm that arrives from outside, but a tremor from within. A silent awakening that cannot be ignored. Carl Jung called this the midlife transition, a point where the personality begins to reorient itself from external achievement toward inner truth. It is the hour when the soul knocks on the door of consciousness and says, "It's time." For decades, we have built structures, careers, relationships, reputations, routines. We have played our parts diligently, chasing goals, accumulating experiences, and defining ourselves through roles. The professional, the partner, the parent, the provider. Yet somewhere beneath the polished persona, a subtle dissonance begins to hum. Success, comfort, and status no longer satisfy the same way they once did. There is an inexplicable sense that something vital is missing, something unspoken, unseen, yet urgently alive. Cinematic imagery. Imagine a vast city at dawn. The streets are empty, the skyscrapers silent. A man stands at the window of a high-rise apartment, looking down at the world he built. Every light in every building represents a goal achieved, a victory earned. But as he looks, the lights begin to dim one by one. The city still stands, yet something feels hollow, as though the architecture of ambition can no longer hold the weight of his soul. This is the threshold of awakening. It does not announce itself with drama, but with subtle whispers, a restlessness, an unease, a question echoing in the mind. Is this all there is? It's not depression, though it can feel like it. It's not dissatisfaction, though it carries that flavor. It's the beginning of consciousness expanding beyond the limits of the persona. At 40, the psyche begins to demand integration. Everything that has been repressed, ignored, or left unexplored begins to surface. Jung described this as the call of the self, the deeper, total self that includes both light and shadow. It calls the individual to turn inward, to re-examine beliefs, habits, and attachments. What once brought meaning now feels superficial. The external world loses some of its luster, and attention turns toward the inner landscape. Cinematic metaphor: a traveler reaches a fork in the road. One path leads deeper into the bustling city, the familiar, predictable continuation of life as it has always been. The other leads into a mist-covered forest, dark and silent. The forest represents the unconscious, mysterious, intimidating, but full of hidden treasures. The traveler hesitates. The city offers safety. The forest promises truth. This is the moment of awakening, the realization that growth requires stepping into the unknown. Many people experience this awakening as a crisis. The midlife crisis, misunderstood and trivialized by popular culture, is in fact a sacred invitation. The individual senses that the outer structures no longer mirror the inner self. Relationships strain under invisible pressures, careers feel meaningless, and achievements lose emotional color. Yet beneath the confusion, something luminous begins to stir, the potential for authentic transformation. Physically, emotionally, and spiritually, the awakening manifests in countless ways. Some feel it as exhaustion, the weight of decades of striving without rest. Others feel it as emptiness, a subtle but constant ache for something deeper. Some experience it through dreams, vivid, symbolic, often unsettling visions that seem to come from another world. The unconscious is speaking now, demanding attention. A recurring dream motif described by Jungian analysts is the image of a house. In youth, we tend to live only on the upper floors, the rooms of the persona, well lit and decorated for social display. At midlife, we begin to explore the basement, the rooms we have locked away, filled with forgotten memories, regrets, and suppressed desires. As we descend into these shadowed spaces, we discover both pain and power. We realize that the true treasure lies not in perfection, but in wholeness. The awakening also brings an encounter with mortality. At 40, time begins to feel tangible. The infinite horizon of youth narrows into a visible line. Friends age, parents decline, and the mirror reflects subtle signs of change. The psyche begins to understand, not intellectually, but existentially, that life is finite. And with that realization comes urgency. What do I truly value? What do I still long to create, experience, or become before time runs out? Cinematic moment: a man sits alone in a cafe, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. Around him, life continues. Laughter, conversations, movement. But his gaze is distant, as if seeing beyond the visible world. In the reflection of the glass, he sees not just his face, but the face of the child he once was, the dreamer, the idealist, the unbroken spirit. The two faces overlap, merging, reminding him of something long forgotten, that the essence of who he is has never been lost, only buried beneath layers of adaptation. The awakening at 40 is not a collapse, it is an initiation. The ego, having spent decades constructing identity, must now yield to something larger. Jung wrote that the afternoon of life must not be lived according to the program of its morning. The same tools that built success in youth cannot bring fulfillment in maturity. The shift demands new values: introspection over ambition, authenticity over approval, purpose over productivity. Yet this awakening is not gentle. It can dismantle careers, challenge marriages, and provoke radical change. Some feel compelled to leave everything familiar behind: jobs, homes, even entire lifestyles. Others make quieter, subtler shifts, pursuing creativity, spirituality, or service. The form of transformation varies, but the essence is the same: the soul reclaiming its voice. In Jungian terms, this stage marks the beginning of individuation, the conscious process of becoming whole. It requires courage to face the shadow, humility to question one's own beliefs, and patience to navigate the confusion of rebirth. It is not the end of life's first half, but the dawn of true adulthood, the moment when we begin to live consciously rather than reactively. Cinematic closing. The same man from the beginning stands again at his window, but now the dawnlight has changed. The city below no longer feels empty, it feels alive, pulsing with mystery. The dimming lights are replaced by the soft glow of sunrise. He breathes deeply, no longer looking outward for meaning but inward for truth. The journey into the forest awaits, uncertain, vast, but undeniably his own. Pause for a moment. Look at your own life, not as a checklist of achievements, but as a story unfolding. What whispers have you been ignoring? What parts of you are calling for attention? Share your thoughts below and take the first step toward your own awakening. Part 3. The fall of the mask. In the early decades of life, the persona serves us well. It is the mask we wear to survive, to be accepted, to function in society. It helps us build careers, relationships, and reputations. It protects us from rejection and gives us a sense of belonging. But as Jung warned, the persona is not the self. It is a carefully crafted performance, a role designed for the outer world. And when life reaches its midpoint, the mask begins to crack. The fall of the mask is one of the most painful and liberating experiences of human existence. It begins subtly. The smile that once felt natural now feels rehearsed. The conversations that used to energize begin to drain. You attend the same meetings, go to the same gatherings, speak the same words, yet something within you feels absent, disconnected, hollow. The mask no longer fits. Cinematic imagery. Imagine standing before a mirror at night. The reflection looks familiar, but something is off. The eyes, once full of conviction, seem tired, uncertain. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the image in the mirror begins to shift. The painted smile fades, the edges blur, and the reflection cracks like glass. Behind the shattered surface, another face begins to emerge, older, deeper, more authentic. This is the beginning of the fall of the mask. Throughout our youth, we become specialists in pretending. We learn to perform roles demanded by culture: the obedient child, the loyal employee, the strong father, the elegant woman, the achiever, the pleaser, the caretaker. These roles are rewarded. Society applauds them. They bring comfort and validation. But over time, the performance consumes the actor. The true self, repressed beneath layers of adaptation, begins to suffocate. Jung believed that when the persona becomes overdeveloped, the individual loses connection to the inner world. Life turns mechanical, scripted, predictable. There's no spontaneity, no authenticity, only repetition. The person becomes a living echo of societal expectations, no longer guided by the pulse of the soul. And then, without warning, life intervenes. A loss, a betrayal, a failure, a health scare, something shatters the illusion of control. The event itself is not the cause of awakening, it is the trigger. The mask, weakened by years of repression, finally breaks under the pressure of reality. The facade collapses. Cinematic metaphor, a theater stage in ruins. The velvet curtains hang torn, the spotlight flickers, the audience has vanished. The actor stands alone among the wreckage, still wearing remnants of costume and makeup. For a long moment, silence reigns. Then, slowly, he begins to remove the costume, piece by piece, the jacket of pride, the mask of confidence, the crown of approval. Beneath the costume is something raw, trembling, alive. The fall of the mask is not a failure, it is a revelation. It exposes the truth we have long avoided, that the roles we played were never the totality of who we are. The teacher, the parent, the entrepreneur, the friend, these are only fragments of identity, tools for survival. The self is far more vast, mysterious, and contradictory. When the persona collapses, the shadow emerges. Jung described the shadow as the repository of everything we deny in ourselves: anger, jealousy, fear, shame, vulnerability, creativity, even greatness. The shadow is not evil, it is simply unacknowledged. It contains both darkness and potential. The fall of the mask forces confrontation with the shadow, often through emotional turbulence, irritability, sadness, anxiety, or sudden passions. These are not signs of breakdown, they are signs of awakening. Cinematic moment: imagine descending into a dimly lit basement. Dust fills the air, old furniture lies covered by sheets, and forgotten photographs hang on cracked walls. As you pull away the covers, you uncover fragments of your past. Dreams abandoned, emotions denied, talents left unused. Each object in the basement represents a piece of your shadow. The air is heavy but sacred. This is the confrontation that transforms. Yet society resists this process. The world demands that we keep our masks intact, polished, and smiling. To admit confusion or vulnerability is seen as weakness. To step outside the persona is to risk misunderstanding, even rejection. But the soul cannot thrive behind a mask. Jung observed that many neuroses stem from this inner conflict, the tension between who we appear to be and who we truly are. The fall of the mask demands courage, the courage to lose status, to be misunderstood, to disappoint expectations. It asks us to face discomfort, to embrace uncertainty, to accept that we may not yet know who we truly are. This is why so few undertake the journey voluntarily. Most are dragged into it by crisis, forced to shed illusions one painful layer at a time. But once the mask begins to fall, there is no turning back. The process may be frightening, but it is also deeply healing. As the artificial layers dissolve, authenticity begins to emerge. The voice of intuition grows louder. Desires once suppressed begin to reawaken. Creativity returns. Relationships transform. Some end, others deepen. The individual becomes more real, less performative. Cinematic imagery intensifies. The actor, now stripped of costume, steps outside the ruined theater. The night air is cold, the city silent. For the first time, he feels the wind on his face, the earth beneath his feet. He walks without applause, without script, without certainty, but with truth. The stars above are not an audience, they are witnesses to rebirth. Psychologically, this stage marks a psychic death, the end of an identity that once served us but now limits us. Jung compared this to alchemy. The old form must dissolve for a new one to emerge. This dissolution, though painful, is sacred. It allows the ego to realign with the deeper self, opening space for transformation. The fall of the mask also initiates compassion. Once we see our own vulnerabilities, we become more empathetic toward others. We realize that everyone wears a mask, everyone hides wounds. Authentic connection becomes possible only when two masks fall simultaneously, when two souls dare to meet without defense. In the ruins of the old persona, a new voice whispers, quiet, patient, but unmistakable. You were never the mask. You were always the one watching from behind it. Cinematic closure. Dawn breaks. The man, now unmasked, stands at the edge of a vast landscape. Behind him lies the theater of illusion, ahead, an open horizon. He takes a slow breath, feeling both fear and freedom. The fall of the mask was not the end, it was the beginning of authenticity. Look into your own reflection. Which parts of you are still hidden behind performance or fear? What would happen if you dared to show your real face to the world? Share your truth below. The moment of unmasking is the first act of liberation. Part 4. The Journey Inward. After the mask falls, silence follows. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of emptiness, the hollow space left behind when all illusions collapse. Many reach this stage terrified. They look around and see nothing familiar. The career no longer defines them. The applause has faded. The roles have dissolved. What remains is a question that echoes in the void: who am I without the mask? This is the moment when the true journey inward begins. Cinematic imagery. Imagine standing at the entrance of a vast, dark forest. The moon is pale, the path unclear, the trees dense and alive with whispers. Behind you lies the burning city of your old identity, its walls collapsing, its lights fading. Ahead lies mystery. You hesitate. Every instinct urges you to turn back. But somewhere deep within, another voice, softer yet stronger, says, "Go on." This is the voice of the self, the part of you that has waited patiently for decades to be heard. The journey inward is not about adding more to yourself, it is about stripping away everything false until only truth remains. It is a descent, not into chaos, but into depth. Jung described this process as individuation, the movement toward wholeness, the alignment between consciousness and the unconscious. But this descent is not linear. It feels like walking through fog, where familiar maps no longer apply. You lose certainty, direction, and sometimes faith. The things that once made sense begin to crumble. Your old coping mechanisms, control, denial, distraction, fail you. Life demands honesty. You are forced to face the very parts of yourself you have avoided. And so begins the confrontation with the shadow, the hidden realm of your psyche, containing everything you have rejected, denied, or feared. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your mirror. Inside it live the exiled emotions, the abandoned dreams, the silenced rage, the tenderness you were taught to suppress. Each one calls your name, asking to be seen, accepted, and integrated. Cinematic metaphor. You step deeper into the forest. The trees grow taller, their branches like arms reaching toward the sky. You come upon a clearing where a pool of dark water reflects your image. But the reflection is not flattering. It shifts and distorts, revealing versions of you that you don't want to see. The jealous one, the coward, the manipulator, the lost child, the dreamer. At first, you recoil. Then, slowly, you kneel by the water and touch the surface. The image ripples, merging all faces into one. You realize, they are all you. This is the essence of Jung's wisdom. You cannot become whole by rejecting your darkness. You become whole by embracing it. Integration, not perfection, is the goal. But this work is not easy. The ego resists. It prefers the comfort of old patterns, even if they cause pain. The ego fears annihilation, while the self seeks transformation. The tension between the two creates what Jung called the creative struggle, a psychological crucible in which the old self burns so the new one can emerge. During this stage, many people experience intense emotions: grief, anger, confusion, longing. But these emotions are sacred, they are the language of the soul. They reveal where the wounds are and where healing must occur. The journey inward is not an escape from pain, it is the courageous act of walking directly into it. Cinematic moment. The traveler in the forest encounters a storm. Thunder roars, trees bend, rain pours. The instinct is to run, but there is nowhere to go. So they stop, stand still, and let the storm wash over them. When the storm passes, the forest is transformed, cleaner, brighter, alive. The same happens within. When we stop resisting pain, transformation begins. Along this path, symbols and dreams become guides. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks in images, not words. Recurring dreams, synchronicities, strange coincidences, all of these are messages from the self trying to communicate with consciousness. Paying attention to them can illuminate the path through darkness. Example: a person keeps dreaming of being lost in a house with many rooms, searching for a light switch. Each room represents an aspect of the psyche: memories, fears, forgotten talents. The dream urges them to explore, to illuminate, to integrate. The house is not a prison, it is the map of the soul. The journey inward also demands solitude. Modern life glorifies constant noise and motion, productivity, entertainment, distraction. But individuation requires silence. It requires stepping away from screens, from validation, from endless doing. It is in quiet moments, sitting alone at night, walking without destination, watching rain, that the voice of the self can finally be heard. In this silence, you begin to remember forgotten truths, that your worth does not depend on achievement, that your purpose is not given by others. That peace cannot be found by controlling life but by aligning with it. Jung often compared this process to alchemy, turning lead into gold. The lead is our unconscious material: pain, shame, fear, anger. The gold is wisdom, authenticity, and freedom that emerge when these materials are consciously transformed. The alchemical fire is life itself, our struggles, relationships, and losses, all burning away impurities to reveal essence. Cinematic metaphor: in an ancient stone chamber, an alchemist works by candlelight. On the table are two flasks, one filled with heavy dark metal, the other empty. Slowly, he adds heat. The metal begins to melt, bubble, and shimmer. Hours later, the liquid transforms into radiant gold. The alchemist wipes his brow and smiles, not because he created gold, but because he became it. The journey inward changes everything. Relationships evolve. Careers may shift. Desires transform. Some connections fall away, but new ones, deeper, truer, appear. You begin to attract people who resonate with your authenticity, not your persona. Life stops being a performance and becomes a conversation with the soul. And slowly, a new kind of peace arises, not the peace of comfort, but the peace of alignment. You no longer need to impress, compete, or conform. You begin to live from the inside out, guided not by fear but by meaning. Cinematic closure: the traveler exits the forest. The dawn light breaks through the trees, illuminating the path. They carry no trophies, no titles, only understanding. Behind them lies the shadowed forest, ahead, an open field bathed in sunlight. They breathe deeply, feeling both human and infinite. The journey inward is not about escaping the world, it is about returning to it transformed. It is about bringing the gold of the soul back to the village, to love more honestly, work more creatively, and live more fully. What parts of yourself have you left in the dark? What emotions or dreams have you avoided? Take a quiet moment today to listen to what your inner voice is trying to tell you. The journey inward begins with a single act of honesty. Part 5. The so-called crisis. The world begins to tremble beneath your feet. Everything that once defined you, your job, your possessions, your relationships, your identity, starts to dissolve like sand slipping through an open hand. What you once called life now feels like a hollow stage, the spotlight dimming, the audience gone. You are left alone with the echo of your own voice asking the question no one ever wants to hear. Who am I, if I am no longer what I do? This is the so-called crisis, the dark intersection between what you have been and what you might become. Society labels it a midlife crisis, but Jung called it something far deeper: the death of illusion. It is not a breakdown, it is a breaking open. The walls that protected you now confine you. The comforts that once soothed you now suffocate you. You are standing at the edge of yourself, staring into the abyss of meaning. Many people try to escape this moment. They drown it in work, bury it in noise, or decorate it with distractions. A new car, a younger lover, a desperate adventure to feel alive again. But the void remains. The soul is patient, yet relentless. It will whisper until you listen, and if you refuse, it will scream. This crisis is the turning point. It demands that you stop running. The persona, the mask you've worn for decades, begins to crumble. Behind it, the repressed fragments of your shadow emerge like ghosts returning from exile. You start to see the parts of yourself you denied, your fears, your regrets, your buried desires. The mirror no longer flatters, it reveals. And the revelation hurts. Jung said that this stage is unavoidable for those who wish to live consciously. The ego must die for the self to emerge. Like a snake shedding its old skin, You are being forced to grow beyond the boundaries of your former identity. And yet, this shedding feels like being torn apart. You wake at night with the weight of invisible hands pressing on your chest. Memories rise, choices you didn't make, words you never said, the person you could have become. You look around and realize that everything external feels foreign, disconnected from the pulse of your being. You crave something real, something eternal, but you can't name it. This is the paradox of the crisis. The soul dismantles your world not to destroy you, but to rebuild you. Every loss is an initiation, every confusion a doorway to deeper wisdom. You are not being punished, you are being purified. The fire that burns is the same fire that forges steel. There will be moments when you feel utterly lost. You will want to go back, to rebuild the old structure of life. But the bridge behind you is already in flames. What once sustained you is gone. The only way forward is inward, into the labyrinth of the psyche where monsters and miracles coexist. You begin to see signs everywhere, in dreams, coincidences, even in pain. The unconscious speaks through symbols, a recurring image, a forgotten melody, a sudden vision of light in the midst of despair. You start to sense that something greater is trying to reach you, to guide you through this inner storm. In the silence between breakdowns, a faint voice emerges. Surrender. Not to defeat, but to transformation. Surrender to the process of becoming. Let the old die so the new can breathe. The crisis becomes your initiation, your passage into the deeper layers of existence. What you lose is superficial, what you gain is eternal. You learn that the fall is not the end of flight, but the beginning of wings. And one day, you look back and realize, the so-called crisis was not a curse. It was a calling. The collapse of everything false was the only way for the truth to finally take root. You are no longer the person you were, and that is the point. The mask has burned away, and beneath the ashes, the face of your true self begins to emerge. Raw, real, luminous. The so-called crisis is not about losing your life, it is about reclaiming it. If this moment resonates, if you, too, feel the ground shifting beneath your feet, don't run. Stay. Listen. The storm is not here to destroy you, it's here to reveal you. Embrace it, and you'll discover that what you thought was the end is only the beginning of becoming. Part 6. The Search for Meaning. When the dust of the crisis begins to settle, silence returns, but it is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of emptiness. The old structures have fallen, the familiar noise has vanished, and you find yourself standing in the ruins of what used to be your life. The applause is gone. The roles have dissolved. The masks are scattered on the ground. And in the vast hollow space that remains, a single question echoes. What is the meaning of all this? This question is not intellectual. It is existential. It rises from the depths of the soul, demanding an answer that cannot be spoken but must be lived. You feel an ache, a longing that no possession, no success, no fleeting pleasure can satisfy. You begin to understand that what you truly seek is not happiness, but meaning. Viktor Frankl, who survived the unimaginable horror of the concentration camps, once wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Jung's work harmonized with this truth. Meaning is not found outside of us, but in the dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, between the known and the mysterious. And so begins the inner pilgrimage, the search for meaning. You walk through the landscape of your past, gathering fragments of yourself like sacred relics. You begin to reinterpret every failure, every heartbreak, every moment of joy and despair, as pieces of a hidden pattern. Slowly, painfully, you realize that nothing was random. Each experience was a symbol, each loss a lesson, each encounter a mirror. Meaning does not reveal itself to those who demand it. It reveals itself to those who are ready to perceive it. It hides in the quiet moments, in a child's laughter, in the sound of rain, in the shadow that moves across your wall at sunset. You start to notice synchronicities, small coincidences that seem to carry invisible messages. A song you hear by chance speaks directly to your heart. A stranger's words echo your private thoughts. Life begins to whisper in symbols again, and you sense the presence of something sacred unfolding beneath the surface of ordinary days. The ego, once obsessed with control, starts to loosen its grip. You no longer chase validation, but understanding. You realize that meaning is not a destination. It is a relationship. It grows in proportion to your willingness to see life as an unfolding story, not a collection of isolated events. But this phase is not without pain. The search for meaning exposes the void that materialism can never fill. You begin to grieve the illusions you once lived by, the myth of endless progress, the fantasy of perfection, the lie of certainty. You begin to see that meaning requires sacrifice, the sacrifice of shallowness, of comfort, of denial. You may wander through philosophies, religions, and teachings, hungry for something to hold on to. But eventually, you realize that no system can define the infinite mystery that pulses at the center of your being. Meaning is not a doctrine. It is an experience. It is the spark of recognition that flares when your soul meets its own reflection in the world. Sometimes, meaning arrives disguised as suffering. The very things that break you also awaken you. In the loneliness of the night, when you stare into the emptiness, you might feel a subtle warmth, a knowing that you are being guided, even through chaos. It is not the comfort of answers, but the peace of trust. Jung often said that meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. When you begin to see your struggles as part of a greater narrative, you transcend the role of victim and step into the role of participant. Life is no longer happening to you, it is happening through you. You become both observer and creator, a co-author of your own myth. The more you listen inward, the more the external world starts to align. What once felt random now feels intentional. The coincidences form constellations of insight, and your path, once shrouded in fog, starts to reveal its hidden design. And yet, meaning is never static. It evolves as you do. The meaning that once gave you strength may eventually dissolve, inviting you to seek again. This is not regression. It is growth. The soul is infinite in its hunger for understanding, and life continuously expands to meet it. You begin to live differently. You slow down. You breathe deeper. You listen more. You no longer seek to conquer the world, but to commune with it. You see beauty in imperfection, wisdom in sorrow, poetry in ordinary things. You realize that meaning is not something you must invent. It is already woven into existence. You simply need to awaken to it. At this stage, your journey becomes less about achievement and more about alignment. You start to align your actions with your inner truth, your work with your values, your relationships with authenticity. The outer life begins to mirror the inner transformation. And as this integration deepens, peace, quiet, unassuming, but profound, begins to emerge. You no longer fear the unknown, for you see that it is filled with potential, not threat. The search for meaning has brought you home to yourself. In the end, you discover what Jung and Frankl both knew. Meaning is not found in the pursuit of happiness, but in the courage to face reality and still say yes to life. If you are searching for meaning in the ruins of what was, take heart. This emptiness is not a void, but fertile soil. Every question is a seed. Let it grow. The answers will not come from the world outside, but from the silence within you. Listen closely. Your soul has been waiting to speak. Part 7. The Call to Self-Realization. There comes a moment when the search for meaning no longer points outward. It turns sharply inward, like a compass spinning until it finds true north. You have looked for purpose in the world, in others, in ideals and achievements. But now, the whisper becomes a roar. The meaning you seek is you. This is the call to self-realization, the soul's final summons to become what it has always been beneath the noise of history, society, and fear. It is not a gentle call, it is a burning one. It will dismantle everything false, strip away every borrowed identity, and demand that you stand naked before the mirror of your own being. Jung called this the path of individuation, the process through which a human being becomes whole, integrated, and real. It is not about perfection. It is about authenticity. It is not about rising above the world, but sinking deep into its mystery until you no longer see separation between you and life. At first, this calling feels like a quiet restlessness, an invisible tug in the chest. You can't explain it, but you know something inside you wants to be born. Yet with this awakening comes resistance. The ego trembles, fearing the loss of control. It whispers, "Stay the same. You're safe here." But you are not. Safety is stagnation. Comfort is decay. The path of self-realization begins with confrontation, not with others, but with yourself. The shadow, that hidden chamber of your psyche, must be faced. It contains everything you rejected, the anger, jealousy, lust, fear, but also the power, creativity, and love you buried to fit in. You begin to see that darkness was never your enemy, it was your unclaimed light. To walk this path is to enter the underworld of your own soul. You feel torn between two worlds, the surface self that still clings to expectations, and the deeper self that demands liberation. The conflict intensifies. Old patterns return, old wounds reopen, as if life itself is testing your resolve. You realize that every external battle was just a projection of this inner war. The people who triggered you were mirrors. The obstacles were teachers. The failures were invitations to humility. Everything you blamed on fate was, in truth, your own unconscious seeking expression. Self-realization requires radical honesty. You begin to see how much of your life was built on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of insignificance, fear of truth. You wore masks so convincingly that even you believed them. But now, the illusion fractures. You cannot go back. You start to live differently. You begin to listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the voice beneath your thoughts. You follow intuition over logic, essence over image, truth over convenience. You realize that this voice, this subtle, silent knowing, has been guiding you all along. It is not new. It is ancient. It is you, in your purest form. But this awakening is not without sacrifice. Self-realization will cost you everything that is not real. People may drift away, careers may end, structures may crumble. You will grieve what dies, but also feel an inexplicable peace in its absence. For the first time, you are no longer acting a role. You are being. In this state, life becomes symbolic again. Every encounter carries meaning. Every dream becomes a map. The unconscious no longer feels like a stranger, but a companion. You realize that reality itself is alive, a conversation between your inner world and the outer universe. Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes." This awakening is not about escaping the world, but embracing it fully, with eyes open and heart unguarded. The awakened self does not seek to dominate life, but to participate in its unfolding. You begin to integrate the opposites within you, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, reason and emotion. The war ends. The division dissolves. In their union, a new energy emerges, something sacred, balanced, and whole. You no longer chase happiness. You embody it. You no longer search for meaning. You radiate it. And yet, even now, the journey continues. Self-realization is not a destination but a dynamic process, a dance between the known and the infinite. The more you awaken, the more you see that the self is not contained within the limits of I. It stretches beyond time, beyond form, connected to every living thing. This realization humbles you. It softens your judgment, deepens your compassion. You see yourself in others, not as an idea, but as a lived truth. You no longer strive to prove your worth, you simply exist, and that is enough. The world outside may remain chaotic, but inside, there is order. not the rigid order of control, but the harmonious rhythm of understanding. You start to move with life rather than against it. You let things fall and rise naturally. You trust. You surrender. At this point, the self begins to shine through effortlessly. Your presence alone becomes transformative. People feel peace around you not because you preach, but because you are peace. The struggle to become dissolves into the grace of being. And in that stillness, you understand, the call to self-realization was never about becoming something new. It was about remembering what you have always been: consciousness, awareness, love. If you feel this call stirring within you, answer it. Do not silence it with distraction or fear. This is not the end of who you are, it is the unveiling of what you've always been. Walk inward, and you will find that the universe walks with you. The self has been waiting, patiently, eternally, for you to come home. Part 8. The freedom to be whole. There comes a silence after the storm, a stillness that feels almost foreign at first. The chaos that once defined your existence begins to fade, like thunder retreating into the distance. You've faced your shadows, mourned your illusions, and surrendered your masks. What remains is something raw, luminous, and deeply human. This is the freedom to be whole. It is not the loud, triumphant freedom that shouts victory to the heavens. It is a quiet, dignified liberation, the kind that whispers, "I am finally home within myself." To be whole means to stop fighting the tides of your own nature. You no longer wage war against what you feel, who you are, or what you've been. The fragments you once exiled, your anger, tenderness, vulnerability, courage, begin to merge into harmony. Like broken glass reshaped by fire, your spirit reforms into something stronger, more translucent, more real. This phase of life feels different. The urgency to prove, to climb, to conquer, begins to dissolve. The tempo of your soul changes. You start walking slower, but seeing more. You taste things more deeply, hear the silence between words, notice the space between breaths. The world has not changed, you have. Jung believed that true freedom comes not from escaping the opposites of human nature, but from embracing them. You are both light and shadow, strength and fragility, reason and instinct. You are the artist and the clay, the question and the answer. To reject one part of yourself is to reject the whole tapestry of your being. This integration does not happen overnight. It unfolds gently, like dawn creeping across a mountain. One morning you wake and realize you no longer fear your own depth. You can sit with your darkness without needing to fix it. You can look at your wounds and see not shame, but wisdom. You begin to understand that healing is not about erasing the past, it's about reclaiming it. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every failure was a teacher disguised as loss. They were all leading you here, to this point of clarity. Freedom, you discover, is not the absence of boundaries, it's the alignment of your life with your truth. You start saying no without guilt, yes without hesitation. You stop performing, stop explaining, stop justifying. Your energy becomes sacred, your time precious. You no longer live to be understood. You live to be real. And with this authenticity comes peace, not the peace of perfection, but the peace of coherence. The outside and inside begin to mirror each other. Your thoughts, words, and actions align. There is less noise in your mind, less tension in your heart. You don't need to control the flow of life anymore. You trust it. People notice something different in you. You radiate calm without trying. You listen more than you speak. You forgive without fanfare. You begin to draw others not by effort, but by resonance. Those who vibrate on the same frequency, seekers, healers, creators, are drawn to your light. Those who thrive on drama quietly fade away. This is the subtle power of wholeness. It attracts harmony. In Jungian terms, the self, the totality of your psyche, becomes the guiding force. You stop being led by the ego's cravings and start being moved by something deeper, quieter, more ancient. Life begins to feel like a conversation between your soul and the universe. Synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences Jung spoke of, appear more often. You think of someone, and they call. You face a question, and the answer shows up in a book, a dream, a stranger's words. It feels as if life is guiding you, not from above, but from within. And perhaps it always was. You start to experience what mystics and poets have described for centuries, the unity of all things. The tree outside your window, the laughter of a child, the rhythm of rain, everything vibrates with the same sacred energy that moves through you. You are not separate. You never were. The illusion of separation was just the ego's defense mechanism, and now it has melted. You realize that love, not romantic love, not conditional affection, but the vast, unfiltered essence of love, is the true language of the universe. It is not something to find or earn. It is something you become. Freedom, at its core, is love made conscious. You no longer chase after happiness. You cultivate meaning. You stop trying to control what happens and focus instead on how you respond. You are no longer obsessed with doing more, but with being present. And in that presence, you discover joy that doesn't depend on circumstance. You see beauty in impermanence, the wrinkle, the scar, the ending. You no longer resist the passage of time because you've learned that time doesn't take, it transforms. And perhaps for the first time, you stop searching for purpose, as if it were hidden somewhere outside of you. You understand that purpose is not found, it is lived. It's in how you love, how you create, how you show up in the world each day. You begin to see that life isn't asking you to be perfect, it's asking you to be whole. To integrate the sacred and the mundane, the divine and the human. You realize that enlightenment isn't about escaping your humanity, but embodying it fully. Laughing, crying, stumbling, forgiving, and continuing to grow. At this stage, gratitude becomes your natural state. You look back at the chaos of your earlier years and feel no bitterness. Every storm had purpose. Every heartbreak cracked your shell so your soul could breathe. Every failure forced you closer to truth. The world outside may still spin in noise and illusion, but you found an inner sanctuary that nothing can disturb. You live from that center now, grounded, awake, unafraid. That is the freedom Jung spoke of. Not freedom from life, but freedom in life. If you've reached this moment, the calm after chaos, cherish it. You are tasting the quiet power of wholeness. Protect it. Nurture it. Live from it. The world needs people who are whole, not perfect, grounded, not grand, awake, not idealized. The journey has not ended, it has only just begun. Keep walking. Keep unfolding. You are free, and your wholeness is the gift you now give to the world. Part 9. The freedom to be whole. There comes a time when wholeness stops being an idea and becomes a way of breathing. You no longer try to be whole. You simply are. The endless searching that once consumed you fades into the background like an echo of another life. What remains is stillness, a sacred rhythm that synchronizes with every heartbeat of the universe. In this deeper freedom, something extraordinary happens. The boundary between you and the world begins to dissolve. You no longer see yourself as a solitary traveler, but as part of a vast living tapestry. Every glance, every voice, every gust of wind becomes part of your story, and you, theirs. The ego, once desperate to defend its territory, now relaxes its grip. It no longer needs to prove, to compare, to control. It understands its rightful place, not as the master of your existence, but as its faithful servant. It steps aside so that the self, the vast consciousness beneath your identity, can breathe, speak, and live through you. This shift is subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but you start to feel it in how you move through the world. There is less tension in your steps, less noise in your thoughts. You no longer chase after people or outcomes. You attract what resonates and release what doesn't, effortlessly, without resentment. You begin to notice beauty in what you once ignored. The play of light across the floor, the tremble of a leaf in the wind, the faint sound of laughter from another room. Existence itself becomes poetry. The mundane transforms into sacred ritual. This is what Jung meant when he said the self is both the center and the circumference of the psyche. You begin to understand that every person, every event, every symbol in your life is an expression of the same eternal essence that lives in you. You are both the wave and the ocean. And yet, this realization doesn't make you detached from the world, it makes you more compassionate, more engaged, more present. You begin to see the suffering of others not as something foreign, but as your own pain reflected back to you. You no longer seek to judge or to fix. You simply understand. When someone lashes out, you sense their wound beneath the words. When someone loves, you feel the divine moving through them. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for empathy, not reaction. You start to live with an open heart, not because it's safe, but because it's real. Wholeness, you discover, is not about avoiding the dark. It's about holding the dark and the light in your hands and saying, both belong. You've stopped running from the parts of you that once terrified you. You've turned toward them, listened, and found that they were never enemies. They were exiles waiting to come home. There is a power that arises from this kind of acceptance, a quiet authority that doesn't shout, but transforms everything it touches. You no longer depend on external validation because your worth is no longer negotiable. You are no longer searching for love, you have become its source. In relationships, this shift changes everything. You stop demanding that others complete you. You no longer fall into the trap of dependency or control. Love becomes freedom, two whole beings meeting not out of need, but out of overflowing fullness. You give because you want to, not because you have to. You love without fear of loss because you understand that what is real can never truly be taken from you. In this state, solitude is no longer loneliness, it is communion. You can sit alone for hours, and yet feel connected to all of existence. You find yourself drawn to nature, to silence, to simplicity. You feel an unspoken dialogue with everything alive, the trees, the sky, even the earth beneath your feet. You begin to live in rhythm with life itself. You no longer force outcomes. You plant, you wait, you trust. You begin to see that everything unfolds with precision, not always according to your desire, but always according to your growth. And perhaps the greatest transformation of all is how you view time. You stop racing against it. You no longer see aging as loss, but as revelation. Each line on your face becomes a scripture, each year a chapter in your becoming. You start to realize that the soul does not age. It expands. Wholeness is not static. It breathes, it evolves, it keeps unfolding in deeper layers of truth. Just when you think you've arrived, life presents a new challenge, not to break you, but to widen your heart, to test your wisdom, to polish your light. In Jung's language, this is the integration of the self, the ongoing dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, the finite and the infinite. You realize that your life is not a random sequence of events, but a symbolic narrative, a myth written by your soul long before you were born. Every loss, every joy, every coincidence carries meaning. The entire universe becomes a mirror reflecting the evolution of your inner world. You start to live mythically, not in fantasy, but in awareness. You become the hero and the sage, the wounded and the healer. You embody paradox. You no longer fear contradiction because you understand that truth is vast enough to hold opposites without collapsing. Freedom deepens here, not freedom from struggle, but freedom within it. You begin to see that suffering itself can be sacred when met with consciousness. Even pain becomes a teacher, a purifier, a reminder of your aliveness. You learn to bow to it, not as punishment, but as initiation. And through it all, gratitude flows like a constant undercurrent. You find yourself thanking life for the storms that broke you, the loves that shaped you, the silences that taught you to listen. Gratitude becomes your prayer, your practice, your way of seeing. You realize now that you are not becoming something new, you are remembering what you have always been. Consciousness experiencing itself through the miracle of form. The divine expressing itself as you. If you have glimpsed this deeper freedom, guard it gently. Live it boldly. Do not rush to explain it. Let it transform you. The world is hungry for people who live from their wholeness, who move with love, speak with presence, and act with wisdom. Let your life become that example. Remember, the purpose of awakening is not to escape the world, but to illuminate it. Let your being be the light that guides others home. Part 10. Life truly begins. There comes a moment when silence says everything. When you realize that all the searching, all the pain, all the endless turning of the wheel, was never meant to lead you somewhere else. It was meant to bring you here. Here, where there is no more pretending. No more masks. No more trying to become something you already are. You stand at the edge of everything you once feared to lose, and you see that nothing was ever truly lost. Every ending was a doorway disguised as heartbreak. Every tear, a baptism. Every failure, a teacher that carried you closer to yourself. You understand now, life was never about reaching perfection, it was about remembering wholeness. It was never about winning, achieving, or conquering, it was about awakening. And awakening doesn't happen in a flash of light or some divine spectacle. It happens quietly, in the ordinary moments that used to pass unnoticed. When you breathe deeply and feel gratitude for no reason. When you walk under the rain and no longer rush for shelter. When you sit with someone and listen, truly listen, without needing to fix or prove. That is where enlightenment hides, in simplicity. Because truth, when fully seen, is simple. Love, when fully lived, is effortless. Peace, when finally allowed, is already here. In this realization, you stop dividing the world into sacred and mundane. You see that everything is sacred. The cup of coffee, the sound of footsteps, the gentle warmth of sunlight across your skin. You begin to live in reverence, not because life has changed, but because you have. You start to laugh more. Deep, unrestrained laughter. Not the polite kind, but the kind that comes from the belly, from the soul. You laugh at your old fears, at your stubbornness, at how hard you fought to control what was never yours to control. You laugh because you finally understand the cosmic joke, that everything you were looking for was always within you. And as you laugh, you cry. Not from sadness, but from release. Because for the first time, you're not trying to hold life together. You're letting it flow through you, wild, unpredictable, beautiful. You are no longer the actor trapped in the script. You are the awareness watching the play unfold, knowing that every scene, every character, every plot twist has meaning. This is where life truly begins. Not when you become someone new, but when you stop running from who you are. Not when you reach your goals, but when you realize that every step, even the missteps, was sacred. Not when the world changes, but when your perception of it does. The old self, the one obsessed with outcomes, validation, and control, dissolves like fog in morning light. You no longer need to be the center of every story. You are content simply to be. And in that being, something miraculous happens. The world opens. People respond to your authenticity. Life begins to cooperate with your energy. Synchronicities appear not as coincidences, but as confirmations that you are aligned with your essence. You notice how life seems to whisper, "Yes, this is it." You start to move differently, slower, but with purpose. You speak less, but your words carry truth. You create not for applause, but as an act of love. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And peace, oh peace, it no longer feels like a goal. It feels like your natural state. You realize it was never missing, It was only buried under layers of noise, fear, and conditioning. Now that they've fallen away, peace reveals itself like sunlight after a long storm. In this stillness, you sense something greater moving through you. Call it spirit, God, source, the universe. You realize that you are not separate from it. You are its expression, its echo in human form. Your breath is its rhythm. Your heart is its drumbeat. Every moment is sacred because every moment is it, experiencing itself as you. And with that realization, love becomes your natural language. Not romantic love, not conditional affection, but the vast, inclusive love that simply is. You see it in strangers, in the weary eyes of those still searching, in the innocence of a child, in the silence between words. You understand that everyone is on the same journey, each soul remembering itself in its own time, through its own lessons. You stop judging where others are, because you remember how long it took to come home yourself. Compassion replaces comparison. Presence replaces projection. This is the summit of inner evolution, where knowing transforms into being. You are no longer the seeker, you are the found. You are no longer the student, you are the lesson. You are no longer the dreamer, you are the dream. And yet, paradoxically, this is not an ending, it is the beginning of real life. Because now you can live without fear of death, love without fear of loss, and create without fear of failure. You are finally free to live fully. You wake up each morning not with anxiety, but with curiosity. You no longer ask, "What will I get today?" but rather, "What will life reveal today?" Every sunrise feels like a first one. Every moment feels like grace. You understand that the journey never truly ends, it only deepens. There will still be challenges, shadows, losses, but you meet them now from another place. You no longer see them as threats, but as invitations. You no longer collapse under them, but rise through them. This is maturity of the soul, the calm knowing that even chaos serves a purpose. You no longer fight the river. You become the river. You flow. You trust. You surrender, not as defeat, but as partnership with life itself. And when you look back, across all the pain, confusion, and beauty that brought you here, you whisper softly, "It was all worth it." Because now, you see the grand design. The broken pieces were not random, they were the mosaic of your becoming. The dark nights were not punishment, they were purification. The losses were not destruction, they were release. You realize that nothing was wasted. Every scar was a teacher. Every silence was a seed. Every fall was a dance in disguise. And as you finally exhale, fully, deeply, peacefully, you know that life has only just begun. Not the life of doing, chasing, or performing, but the life of being. You are home. You are whole. You are free. And that is the real beginning. If these words resonated with you, let them live beyond this moment. Live them. Breathe them. Speak them into your relationships, your art, your choices. Because a world transformed begins with one awakened heart, yours. So go. Live consciously. Love boldly. Walk gently. And remember, you are not here to find the light. You are here to realize that you are the light.